For over 1,000 years, Rome was the center of the world. An empire built on conquest. Its legions were the symbol of its unrivaled power. But what if the source of its immense wealth, its most desired luxuries, wasn't in Rome at all? What if the river of splendor that defined the Roman elite wasn't controlled by emperors or generals, but by an ancient African city that outplayed the empire not with armies, but with an economic genius that Rome itself couldn't live without? This is the story of Adulis, a bustling port on the Red Sea coast, lost to time, but once a vital artery of global trade. This wasn't a rival to be conquered like Carthage. Adulis never sent an army against Rome. It didn't have to. It quietly made itself the indispensable gateway to Africa's wonders, and in doing so, it outsmarted the most powerful empire in history. To understand the genius of Adulis, you first have to understand the obsession that drove Rome. By the 1st century, the Roman Empire was enjoying the Pax Romana, an era of peace and incredible prosperity. With the major wars won, the Roman aristocracy developed a new kind of hunger, not for more land, but for status. And status was all about showing off the exotic. The villas of Roman nobles demanded African ivory for intricate carvings and furniture. Religious ceremonies burned through mountains of frankincense and myrrh, fragrant resins from the Horn of Africa. The Colosseum required a constant supply of exotic animals to entertain the crowds. Lions, leopards, and rhinos captured deep in the African interior. Roman elites wore jewelry made from tortoise shells and prized obsidian, a volcanic glass from the lands around Adulis, valued for its sharp edges and exotic glassy appearance. These weren't just nice-to-haves, they were the currency of power. Owning them projected wealth and a connection to the most mysterious corners of the known world. The problem for Rome was getting them. The overland routes were long, dangerous, and packed with middlemen, who each took a hefty cut. The sea routes were more direct, but navigating the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean required specialized knowledge and local connections that the Romans just didn't have. Rome was the world's biggest customer, but it didn't control its own supply chain. This created a power vacuum, a strategic opening for someone perfectly positioned to fill it. Enter the Kingdom of Aksum. Rising around the 1st century CE in the highlands of modern-day Eritrea and northern Ethiopia, Axum was a new African power, and its greatest asset was a port city on the Red Sea coast called Adulis. Adulis was perfectly placed. It sat at a global crossroads, the ideal pivot point connecting 3 worlds. To the north was Roman Egypt, the entrance to the massive Mediterranean market. To the east, the seasonal winds opened up sea lanes to India and Persia, the source of spices and silks. And to the south and west lay the immense, untapped wealth of the African continent. From its highlands, Axum controlled access to the very goods Rome craved. Caravans brought ivory, rhinoceros horns, and gold from the interior. A network of roads, built and taxed by Axum, ensured a steady flow of these goods right to the docks of Adulis. In fact, a 1st century merchant's guide called The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea describes Adulis as the main market for these goods, a legally appointed port where all the ivory from the region was funneled. The Kingdom of Aksum wasn't just sitting there, letting things happen. It was an ambitious, organized state, and its rulers knew exactly the power they held. They built a strong navy to patrol the Red Sea and made Adulis the official, lawful port on that stretch of the African coast. This gave foreign merchants security and predictability, a huge advantage in the risky world of ancient trade. Axum became so influential that it was one of the first African empires to mint its own coins in gold, silver, and copper, a clear sign of its economic power and ambition. Adulis wasn't just a city, it was the engine of a commercial empire. And this is where Adulis truly outsmarted Rome. The city's power wasn't based on military threats, but on becoming so essential to the Roman economy that challenging it would have been disastrous for Rome itself. Aksumite merchants became the ultimate middlemen, the masters of the ancient supply chain. They understood the markets with a sophistication Rome couldn't replicate. They knew where to get the best ivory and how to transport it. They controlled the sources of incense and had the ships and know-how to trade for spices from India. A Roman merchant pulling into Adulis wasn't dealing with scattered local tribes. They were dealing with the agents of a powerful kingdom. The Aksumites leveraged this position perfectly. In exchange for Africa's raw materials, they imported finished goods from the Roman world, fine fabrics, glass, wine, olive oil, and high-quality metal tools and weapons. This trade was so significant and reliable that Roman merchants would sail to an island just off the coast from Adulis, a safe harbor where they could conduct their business. But they were there on Aksum's terms. Axum became the principal supplier of African luxury goods to the Roman Empire, holding a near monopoly on the flow of wealth from the south and east. While Rome's legions could conquer lands, they couldn't replicate the complex web of trade relationships and logistical skill that Axum had built. Think of it this way. Rome was the world's wealthiest shopper with an unlimited budget, but Adulis owned the only store in town. They managed the inventory, controlled the access, and set the terms. By the 3rd century, the Persian prophet Mani listed Axum as one of the 4 great powers of the world, right alongside Rome, Persia, and China. This wasn't an exaggeration. It was a recognition that Axum, through its port of Adulis, had achieved a level of economic clout that put it in the same league as the world's military superpowers. This is a story that flips our whole understanding of power in the ancient world, showing how economic leverage can be just as decisive as a sword. If you find these forgotten histories as fascinating as we do, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next video. For centuries, Adulis was a thriving, cosmopolitan hub where merchants from 3 continents met. Its churches, built after Axum adopted Christianity in the 4th century, stood as monuments to its wealth. But this golden age, like all others, had a twilight. The fall of Adulis wasn't a single event, but a slow unraveling driven by the changing currents of history. In the 6th and 7th centuries, the world was in upheaval. The devastating plague of Justinian likely weakened the Aksumite kingdom, disrupting its trade and society. The rise of the Sasanian Empire in Persia created a fierce rival that began to challenge Aksum's control over the Red Sea. The final blow, however, came with the Arab conquests of the 7th century. The rapid expansion of Islam across the Middle East and North Africa redrew the map of global trade. The old routes that had linked Aksum to the Byzantine Roman Empire were severed. With its main customer in decline and new powers controlling the seas, Adulis found itself increasingly cut off. Archaeologists have found a layer of destruction at the site, suggesting the city may have been raided. But its decline was probably already underway. Some historians also point to environmental factors, like the harbor silting up, which would have slowly choked off the city's maritime lifeblood. By the 8th century, the once great port of Adulis was mostly abandoned, its markets silent and its warehouses empty, waiting to be buried by the sands. The ruins of Adulis, in modern-day Eritrea, are a quiet monument to a forgotten chapter of history. For more than 700 years, this African city wasn't just part of global trade, it was a power player that directed it. The story of Adulis shows us that history isn't only written by the empires with the biggest armies. Influence comes in many forms, and controlling commerce can be the most powerful of all. Rome thought it ruled the world, but it was a world it never fully controlled. The empire's glittering facade was built on the resources and strategic genius of a kingdom far to its south. Adulis never had to challenge Rome on the battlefield. By mastering the flow of trade and making itself essential, it achieved something far more clever. It made the world's greatest superpower its customer. And in doing so, the lost city of Adulis proved that the keys to an empire aren't always forged in iron, but are sometimes traded in ivory. What other forgotten economic powers do you think deserve more attention? Let us know in the comments below. And for more stories about the civilizations that time forgot, be sure to watch our next video. Thanks for watching,